And we are live. How's it going? How's your week been? What you been up to? This week I'm going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be going on to Reddit and I'm going to be looking through a few posts, a few questions, a few things that people are talking about over on Reddit and just give my opinions really. For me, I enjoy Reddit. I think it's just it's something a bit different to your other social media. It makes you think a bit more and the posts are a bit more... It's people who want to interact and want to get other people's opinions. So I'm going to go through a few bits and pieces and see, let's see where we go with it. So the first post was from, it's a subreddit called CST, Critical Shower Thoughts. And they usually have some pretty cool things on there. It's about critical thinking. So there's another subreddit called Shower Thoughts, but some of their points can be a bit shallow, a bit silly sometimes. But the Critical Shower Thoughts is really out of the box thinking and what if this and what if that. And so the first post that kind of caught my attention the other day was I'm going to read it to you and you'll see a copy of it on screen. It was called Loss of Privacy. If you aren't doing anything wrong, why do you care? And so this is something that's been debated for quite a while now because we're seeing a lot of our freedoms and our privacy taken away from us and restricted. And so there's two arguments. There's one where privacy is really really sovereign. Really, it's paramount to the individual, and so it should be protected at all costs. And then there's the other camp where people say, well, do you know what? Like, if I've got nothing to hide, I'm not a criminal. I'm not a bad person. So if I've got nothing to hide, then why should I worry about companies having my data and my access to my private email, my private voice calls, my whatever it is? I'm not doing anything wrong. So those are the two camps, and it got me thinking about it. That I'm most certainly in the camp of privacy is of the utmost importance to being a free person. Because that's your moments, the things that other people don't need to know. That's your business. It's nobody else's. And so other people shouldn't, as people say, mind your own business. It's nobody else's business what goes on, what you do. So yes, there will be there might be criminal elements that we want to keep an eye on what they're doing, but should everybody else lose their privacy for it? So it goes back to like the Edward Snowden thing and the NSA in the US and they were spying on the citizens, and that's how he pretty much got exiled. So he leaked information that the NSA was watching and listening to everybody, and they were collecting a huge database of everything that everybody was doing. And so it's a little bit. I mean, it's a little bit sinister to be spying on what people are doing, in my opinion. And you might have a different opinion, and I'd love to hear about it. But Edward, so anyway, for me, it's all about control. So the more information that you have about somebody, the more you can use it against them. So if you're one of the people who say, well, I've got nothing to hide, so it's cool, like, take all of my privacy away. I've got nothing to hide. So the problem is that's trusting the people in power, whoever the people are that monitor you, not to abuse that trust and that power. And that they've shown time and again, whether it's our government or different organisations or social media, all of these entities have shown time and again that they're not trustworthy and that they abuse that power. They abuse our data. They sell it. They do this with it. They do that with it. They leak it. So for me, it's not it's really important to keep that privacy. Your private business can be used against you. That's the kind of the end of it is once somebody knows everything about you, they can use it against you. That's how extortion happens around the world. Us in the UK, in the US maybe, I'm not so familiar with Australian culture and the way things work there, but I imagine it's similar. There's a lot of people who are very naive in their thought process. They believe in that the government is noble and does everything with your best interests at heart. And so they'd never abuse this information. But when you go and travel, and when you live in third world countries and developing countries, you realise that it's not. And because they, for whatever reason, the bad elements show themselves, and then you realise, because you see the same behaviours, you realise it happens in your country. So extortion, very much in developing countries, very much extortion's a big kind of business. And what it involves is that criminal gangs will collect information, private information from somebody, and extort them. Oh, so you've been doing this. I'll tell your wife, your children, your whatever. Or you did this, and maybe you don't want anybody else to know. So we're going to, unless you give us this money, we're going to do this. If it even comes down to things more serious, such as kidnapping and all of those things, is if your private information is no longer private and people know where you are at all times, your phone calls aren't private, your messages aren't private, people can track where you're going, can track your movement, and then that's how they coordinate. They can do something bad to you. So it's just, when you look at it in those terms, it is just right to have privacy because it keeps you safe. Once you start giving your business to everybody else, that's when that safety goes out the window. And that's my that's kind of my opinion on that. And so throughout the time, throughout recent history in my lifetime, we've seen how the narratives have been used to create loss of privacy. And the examples that I can think of is shortly after 9/11, there were acts passed in the US and the UK and all around Europe, Australia, whatever, post 9/11, that were anti-terrorism laws. Now, these anti-terrorism laws were passed, or these acts were passed, in order to monitor what people were saying to each other and how people were communicating, and so that was the thought process behind, or that was the narrative behind it. But in reality, what it's allowed to happen is the monitoring of terrorists, of external threats and terrorists, it hasn't been used that much for that. It's been used more for monitoring what the population does. And so now what we're seeing in the US is something very, very similar. So the attack on Capitol Hill just before the inauguration of Joe Biden now was kind of, it's almost been used, whether it was just a spontaneous act or whether it was encouraged in some way. It's now being used to create a new narrative around domestic terrorism, about white supremacy, domestic terrorism, which is just, it's not equivalent. It's not whatever happened, and it wasn't a white supremacy attack on Capitol Hill either. So it was just a group of people who were disenfranchised and wanted to take out their frustration on politicians. That's what it was. So that's now being used to pass new laws, a domestic terrorism law, a domestic terrorism act. We've got terrorists inside our own country now. So we need tighter controls maybe on social media. We need to control the social media. We need to be able to look at people's messaging apps. That's why there's a mass exodus now to other places, other social medias, other apps, away from WhatsApp, moving over to different things like Signal, Telegram. So it's just, you've got to be very, very wary, because these terrorism, was it the Patriot Act following 9/11? What you've got to be wary of with these things is that now the state and the police and whoever else now has the right to come and without warrant, just come into your house and arrest you. No warrant, or come in your house and look through all your private things. And so you've got to be very careful how these things come about and push back against them if necessary. But it's just about that control. It's about creating fear with people, but also then the control of being able to say, do you know what? We know everything about you. We can do this to you. We can do that to you without any problem, no repercussions, because it's law. It's law. It's been passed by judges. And so, again, when people say, well, I've got nothing to hide, like, I'm not privacy, it's fine. Like, I don't need that much privacy. I've got nothing. Come on, no, take it. If it's going to make us safer from these domestic terrorists that I've never seen in my life, walking around you, you've never seen anything around you. Then Edward Snowden he's got quite a famous quote that is, and I'll read it, arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. So you don't it doesn't mean that we just give it all away. If you've got nothing to hide, that doesn't mean that you have to give away your privacy. Just because you've got nothing to say against someone doesn't mean that you just give away free speech and say, okay, nobody can say anything. It's silly. So I think the issue is that once you start saying that privacy is not necessary, it can be used against you. And that's the problem at any moment. And people say, well, how? Well, here's the point. Who decides what's wrong and what's right? Once you've said we can investigate you, it doesn't. All your information is ours. We can investigate you. How do you? Who decides what's wrong and what's right? And so something that you say you've got nothing to hide, you're not a criminal, you've done nothing wrong. What happens when the people who decide what's wrong change something that says that what you're doing is wrong? These people who are in power, and it's been shown now, it's glaringly obvious across the world that there's more kind of personal interests than our governments looking after us. It's more about their own, what's lying in their pockets, the power that they have. So if you're believing that they're thinking about your best interest, or they've got your best interest at heart, it's very naive, very, very naive. Because they're not. They don't care. They don't care at all. They're only in it for themselves. They're only looking after themselves. Because ultimately, if you wanted to now say that a certain government had fraudulently won an election and you wanted to remove that government from power, if that was a legitimate thing, if that had actually happened, there's no recourse to taking them out or to removing them, because the election process, the ballot process doesn't work, because that's already been done and it didn't work. And so now, if you wanted to organise something, that doesn't work anymore, because they can watch what you're doing, what you're saying to each other. And then my final example of that kind of, actually it's a really good example of where people may have said in the past, privacy, it doesn't matter, take my privacy, it's fine, don't worry about it. Like, I've got nothing to hide, I'm not a criminal. But then the part where I said, who decides what's wrong and what's right, let's take somewhere in the Middle East, for example. So you'll have countries in the Middle East where, okay, being gay is against Islam, and that's fair enough. But it's kind of, there's always interpretations and things like that. People are very very relaxed about it, even if it's behind closed doors. And it's always been kind of, what you do behind your closed doors is up to you. And I'd believe that a lot of the Middle East are like that anyway. So it might be against the religion of that country, and it might be quite harsh, harsh punishment, even though it's against the religion. But generally, people would have said, well, whatever you do behind your closed doors, for anybody, is up to you. So then, in some of these countries, then you've had all of the wars and everything else that spawned ISIS and everything. ISIS come in, they're now the power, they're now in control of your city, imagine. And now they're saying, right, we're in control, we decide what's right and wrong. So the people, the gay people who in ISIS-controlled territories, should they have given up their privacy for the greater good? Should they have said, okay, I don't need my privacy now. You can see everything that I do. You can see all my messages to people, to the people that I'm interacting with, the people I'm falling in love with, the people that I'm. Should they have given all of that up? And just being thrown off a building, because that's what happened. So if they would have given up their privacy, for their action of being gay, they would have been thrown off a building. That's what happens. You never know. Giving away privacy, you never know what's around the corner, and so you've got to. Privacy is very, very sacred to us. You've got to keep it at all costs. At all costs. And it's creeping up on us. It really is creeping up on us now. It's creeping up on us that that we no longer we won't have privacy very, very soon. Look at WhatsApp sharing all of your data across with Facebook. It's commoditizing you, it's making you a livestock that money can be made of. So that's just something to think about. It's definitely something that I'm kind of I'm big on privacy. People need to understand that it's sacred to us. So the next one, just moving on, because I'm just going to touch on these points and give my opinions, was a video on high strangeness. It's another subreddit called High Strangeness, and I'm just going to come over. And it was, and I'm going to show the video in a minute. You can watch the video and then I'll discuss. But so it was Graham Hancock. I don't know if you've ever heard of Graham Hancock. Is not too sure what I should have thought about. Should have looked into this before the video, but I'm not sure what his title is. It's he does a lot of things about ancient civilizations, but also altered states of consciousness. So taking psychedelic drugs and how that's developed our brains and helped our brains to evolve. And many people believe that that was the key to our evolution to becoming as evolved as we are now. Our species was that our ancestors took psychedelic substances and that helped our brain to connect neural pathways and connections and things like that. So I'll tell you what, we'll watch the video and then I'll tell you what I think after.
One of the conclusions that I came to with my research on supernatural is that certain categories of beings that are referred to in traditions all around the world, shamans call them spirits. In medieval Europe, they were called fairies and elves. And in modern society, I would suggest they're called aliens. That all of these are the result of experiences in altered states of consciousness. And that if we are in the alert, problem-solving mode of consciousness, we are not going to have those experiences. But in an altered state of consciousness, there's a remarkable unanimity and uniformity and similarity amongst these three supposedly different categories of beings, spirits, fairies, and so-called aliens today. I really went into this in some depth in my research, and I found that there are really astonishing similarities amongst these three categories of beings. Very commonly, shamans, just as we saw from the painted caves, will encounter a spirit being in a therianthropic form, part animal and part human. I was astonished to discover that fairies in medieval Europe were also very frequently encountered in that form. And I have a woodcut from Holland in the 15th century on my desk, which shows a group of fairies dancing in a ring. And if you look closely at them, you see that they are therianthropes, that they have horns and hooves, that they're part animal and part human. And again, in the modern phenomenon of alien abductions, and we have massive documentation on this as a result of John Mack's work, for example. Very frequently, the abductee will first see a being who is an animal, or part animal and part human in form, later perhaps transforms into the more familiar grey type of entity. So there's that common motif running through all three of these experiences. What were fairies best known for and feared for in medieval Europe? It was abducting human beings. What are aliens today best known and feared for? Abductions. What happens with shamans? Very frequently they experience an abduction into the spirit world. It's their first encounter. What about the issue of interbreeding with supernatural beings? I know the cases of shamans who have a sexual partner in the spirit world, a wife, even children in the spirit world. Fairies were constantly amorous towards human beings and would have sexual encounters, and babies would be created. And again, this is a standard motif of modern alien abductions. So one can go through these astonishing similarities in enormous depth, and the conclusion that I came to is that all of these are essentially the same experience, just being viewed through slightly different cultural spectacles. With human beings, interpretation is built into perception from the very beginning. So we should expect our culture to shape our perceptions, but that doesn't mean that there isn't a real basis to those perceptions. And, to cut a long story short, I would say that the beings that shamans call spirits, the beings that medieval Europeans called fairies and elves, and the beings that modern Americans call aliens are all the same beings. And that everybody who has encountered these beings in whatever period of history or whatever culture it takes place has done so through the medium of an altered state of consciousness. And that altered state of consciousness may be very frequently spontaneous, and I believe that is most likely the case with the modern UFO abduction, alien abduction phenomenon, that these are individuals who spontaneously fall into an altered state of consciousness. Or it may be induced by a variety of techniques. Again, electromagnetism is interesting. We have situations where fairies were most commonly seen around megalithic sites in ancient Europe. Maybe those huge megalithic constructions, Stonehenge and Avebury and other such places, were built where they were built because there's some phenomenon in the earth, some energy of the earth, perhaps an electromagnetic energy, which affects human consciousness and opens that doorway into another realm. This may account for why in some situations supernatural experiences are shared by very large groups of people, as for example at Fatima in Portugal. I think it was 1917, if I remember the date correctly, where up to 70,000 people all saw the same supposedly supernatural phenomena. How would we explain that? It's unlikely that all 70,000 were spontaneously entering an altered state at the same time. They clearly weren't taking mushrooms or ayahuasca, not all 70,000 of them. But maybe there was some environmental effect present in that place at that time which affected the consciousness of that large group of people and briefly pulled apart the veil that separates this realm from other realms and allowed them to see through. I think it's enormously helpful in understanding all supernatural, so-called supernatural experiences. I think it's enormously helpful to look at those experiences from the perspective of consciousness. I think this is what's been missing in supernatural research up till now. It's really most unfortunate that people looking for ghosts, for example, will try to use technology in order to find those ghosts. And there are things called ghost meters and measuring of different fields and I don't think that's really going to be very helpful in getting us far down this road. What will be helpful for exploring all forms of supernatural experience is the deliberate induction of altered state of consciousness in a systematic way. And we have the ability to do that. We can do it. All that's lacking is a social framework that would support it.
So that was the video, the Graham Hancock video, and like the thing that it made me think was that we really don't, with 100% certainty, know what our reality is, do we? Like, throughout our life, we have a lot of things happen to us. We have experiences that give almost like a confirmation bias of our reality. So the reality that we see around us is because over time we've had experiences that have built on top of each other. So you can feel that something's solid. If you bang into it, it hurts, and but at the end, that experience is just a bunch of electrical signals in your brain just knocking around, telling you that you've just hurt yourself. So have you actually hurt yourself, or is it just a signal? And kind of, I'll get into that a little bit later on, but yes, but he's talking about the sightings of ghosts and fairies and aliens and other entities throughout history, all actually being the same thing. And one of the things that's interesting, because I love all of this sort of kind of delving into things that are a little bit outside of our comfort zone, outside of our reality, things that, do they exist? Do they not exist? I love that. I love speculating and trying to think of the evidence and trying to form an opinion and from the things that I know. But so all of these things, basically what Graham's saying is that they're all the same thing. It's just throughout history they've constantly come into contact with humans, bumped into humans, and so we've formed an opinion of what we believe them to be. But something that he touched on that I think is quite pertinent is that none of these experiences, when somebody says they've seen an alien, when somebody says they've seen a ghost, in ancient times when they saw fairies, nobody was able to produce evidence of it. They tried and tried and tried and tried, but nobody could give something definitive and say, look, here is what I saw. And so is it something else? Very often these sightings can't be confirmed. Like, I've never had an experience of ghosts or aliens or anything else. We've all had weird experiences and weird things happen, but no, I've never said I've seen something. But could it be that it's been experienced in some other way? Could it be that it's not a real physical thing? Could it be that we've got other senses outside of our five senses? 5 senses? Hearing, taste, touch, smell, vision. 5 senses. That we're experiencing them through something else. So as Graham says, it's normally experienced through when somebody's having or somebody's experiencing an altered state of consciousness. So it may be that, for example, a lot of people have alien encounters or abduction encounters or ghost encounters when they're in the bedroom, when they're asleep, when they're waking up, and so is it that actually there's a couple of theories. Is it that just the mind playing tricks and the mind almost dreaming and conjuring up these images that people believe that they're seeing? Or are they actually interacting with other beings? We don't know. As much as people say that they do, we don't. But so it's very difficult for people to measure these things. Another thing that Graham mentioned was that some of these altered states, obviously you've got sleep, you've got drugs, so if people take psychedelics. But could it also be that people have altered states and see something else, see another dimension, another reality, or beings in this other dimensional reality, when they're stimulated by an electromagnetic field that's naturally forming in the earth, and that's why you have all of the, as he said, places like Stonehenge, because people would go there and have these spiritual experiences. Maybe that's why you have pilgrimages and places, holy places that people go to, because in those places they can reach this altered state of consciousness and they can then communicate with other entities. I do believe there's something to it. I've never experienced anything like that myself, but I'd like to. One way to do it is through shamanic rituals and taking of psychedelic drugs like ayahuasca. But it begs the question: is it? Because Graham's obviously a staunch believer in that there is something else, the other side, and I tend to err on that same way of thinking as well. But I like to look at all possibilities, because the scientific explanation is that it's just brain signals, it's just neural signals and chemistry just forming your experience. So then what is consciousness? Is consciousness real? Like, are you really experiencing life? Or is the whole experience of the world and your life a separate conscious projection? What if this isn't real? What if none of this is real, and you're a consciousness just creating, almost like creating a dream? So when you're in a dream and you think it's real, you're really in that dream. It couldn't be any more real. What if that's what we're living now? That's what I'm doing now. That's what you're doing now. Something to think about. Or is it just brain mechanics? Could it just be brain mechanics? I don't know. I mean, one thing I always think about, and my theories, is that it's more. So it may be that this is a physical world. Absolutely. I mean, I'm pretty sure this is a physical world. But maybe that's just one experience of many. And so one of the feelings that I have is that consciousness does continue. So it's a constant. It's like through life and death and before life, there is a consciousness. Everybody has a consciousness outside of that. And one of the things that brings me to that conclusion is that in the immensity of the universe, and the time, the eternity of the universe, and kind of how long the universe has been in existence, to me, it doesn't feel rational or logical that we should be conscious for such a fraction of a second, such a fraction of moment of time, that each of our lives is a fraction of time in the immensity of time in the universe. So it doesn't make sense to me why we should be conscious and why we should be able to calculate things that will happen in the future, and to not so much that, but to think about our dreams and our hopes and all of these things. It doesn't, to me, if we've accidentally evolved on our planet, really, it shouldn't be we shouldn't be conscious entities. It should just be that we just exist. We're just here, like the rest of the animals. We're just here to exist, to feed, to grow, to procreate, and it just keeps the cycle going. Because that's all. It's just a natural cycle that's randomly been thrown together, But the fact that we can contemplate these things the consciousness that we hold in such a tiny blip, it's less than a flash. Each person has a consciousness in less than a flash, and then it's gone. Something so complex as a consciousness just doesn't make sense to me. So then there's other little things that you can look at and say, okay, is that an indicator that there's that this is reality, this is real? Or is this, again, is there evidence that there's something else? Because if you want to look at scientific evidence and say, okay, but we follow science. Science is what we have the best thing that we have to measure everything and to make sure that to prove that things exist or not exist. This is the best way that we've got. Correct. So, for example, there's things like the Great Silence that scientists can't explain why, in the immensity of space and with so many galaxies around us, so many planets around us, so many solar systems, there are apparently 10 billion trillion planets in the Goldilocks zone of their solar systems. So the Goldilocks zone being the perfect conditions, the perfect distance away from the sun, perfect orbits of their star and everything else. That's the Goldilocks zone. There are 10 billion trillion of these planets in the Goldilocks zone in the visible universe, in the universe that we know. And so scientists can't explain why we've never had any indication, any signal of any format from any other civilization besides our own. We've not had anything. And that's why it's called the Great Silence. Because even with all of the equipment that we've got facing out into space on our planet, looking for things, looking for signals, looking for contact, looking for just a sign, just something, anything, different wavelengths, different waveforms, different, all of these different things, we look and look and look, and we just can't, there's nothing. It's just silent. So it makes you wonder, like, why is there nothing else? They always say that if there's extraterrestrial life out there, then it would be scary. If there's intelligent alien life out there, it would be scary. If there isn't any intelligent extraterrestrial life out there, it's even scarier. It's even scarier to think why we're the only one. And so then it gets me back into that thing. Maybe the reality that we believe is not real at all. Maybe the reality that we believe is either given to us or we create it ourselves. I mean, imagine if our consciousness creates the reality, and it's a constant movement of our consciousness projecting it. Or maybe it's a perceived reality. Maybe it's a perceived existential reality that we perceive the reality that we have. But maybe it's not real. Maybe it's almost like watching a movie. Or maybe it's like The Matrix, that it's so real. We're told that it's real, or we're given an experience that lets us know that this is real. And maybe it's not. So, just going back to Graham Hancock's video, so what if there are actual entities, other beings, other people, other things that we can communicate with, but not necessarily in our dimension or our space or even our consciousness? So what if we don't? What if, I mean, with you've got the multiverse theory and string theory that says that there's multiple dimensions around us, and what if they are just existing? What if they're existing kind of through us and we're existing through them? But there's perceptions, so we only perceive this part, but then there's other parts, but so that's why people interact with other or see other entities, because just in that split moment, for whatever reason, whether it's just a crossover, whether those entities can visit and can touch us in this other, in our reality. What if that's it? So what if these entities are all around you, but we just can't get to them. We can't access them at the moment. What if the reality that we live is created by something else? So this is something I've often thought about. Is what if gods are real? What if gods are these other entities? And what if they're able to create a reality for us? Not just for us, but what if that's their thing? Is they're able to create this reality, and we live it, and we just enjoy it, and we exist here, or even our own consciousness? What if we have kind of a conscious part to ourself and an unconscious part to ourself? And what if the unconscious part is, for example, when you go to sleep, you then go into your unconscious world, and that's where you dream. What if that creates the reality for the conscious side, and it's actually created in real time, and it's rolled out as it's coming out, as these words are coming out of my mouth? That's being created by my unconscious mind, pushing them out of my mouth. That's also an option. It's similar. I always think about the example of the fish in the fishbowl. That the fish in the fishbowl doesn't perceive, because it's so primitive, so like non-complex. It's not the most intelligent animal in the world. It's just an instinctual being. It just eats, mates, and everything else, procreates. So the fish in the fishbowl doesn't perceive anything outside of its fishbowl. And then each day, food comes from the sky, and that's how it eats. Food comes down and it eats the food. And then occasionally, one day it'll be swimming around and it'll see something come down, in a little house, a little castle, or a little diver, or a little plant will come down. And so all it perceives is that these things are coming into existence in its bubble, in its little goldfish bowl, but it can't perceive anything outside it. It doesn't understand that there's anything above. It doesn't understand there's anything outside. It doesn't understand that it's sitting in the living room, its bowl's in the living room or in the kitchen, and there's a bedroom, there's a bathroom, there's a toilet. It doesn't perceive any of those other, it can't comprehend them. If you were to explain to a goldfish in his language about a toilet or about a bathroom, or imagine you could explain to him about rivers and seas, and you could say there's this incredible sea that's bigger than you can even imagine. It's bigger than even humans can imagine and comprehend. It's so massive. And you could just go there and you could just swim, and so like, just think for that goldfish, that's its reality. It doesn't understand anything else. What if we're the same? You don't know. And if it is being created by something else or being created by ourselves, then it would mean that our experience and our reality was nothing more than a figment of our imagination, which is pretty wild to think that this all might just be imagined. And I also find it interesting. I also kind of find it, I do find it very interesting that people will poo-poo all of that and only kind of follow only the things that they can say, well, this is what the evidence shows, so we follow this. And I admit there's plenty of stuff where the evidence will show that definitively this is the thing, this is it, this is the result. But very often when you dig down into that result, and you pick it apart, it's not what the person is claiming it is. So, but it becomes a very closed game. Then it becomes a very you're facing it and you're saying, okay, this is the only thing that exists. There's nothing else, and it's just very. Because I think there's a lot of other things. I think that the amount of other things is greater than what we perceive to be reality. So, I think that there's, to be honest, there's too many people these days who accept what they are told about reality, even to the point of results in experiments and things. Yes, you can do an experiment yourself, and if you see that result again and again and again and again, then fair enough. You have confirmed that result. But there's plenty of people who don't do that, and who kind of just read books and say, yep, that must be true because that's been peer reviewed or whatever else. I just think that there's too much openness for people to do experiments and not have consistent results, but still publish it and say this is what it is, because they want to get their name up in lights. When actually there's a lot more that we don't know than we do know, and we've got to keep an open mind. That's my 2 penneth worth. But what does it mean? Like, what does it mean if there are other dimensions and there are other entities? What does it mean to us? Because we talk a lot about extraterrestrials, so from other planets, don't we? And we say, what if extraterrestrials exist? Like, what does that mean for us? But in our accepted reality, what it means is that they live on another planet. They've somehow travelled over here to see us in vehicles that we can understand, and we understand that it needs propulsion, and then we have the great silence, as I said, and it's just people are like, well, where are they? Where are they? We see UFOs a lot, and now it's been kind of declassified by governments and accepted. Yep, there are UFOs, things like that. But a lot of people see a lot of things. A lot of people experience a lot of strange things that we can't explain. So what if it's not far away? What if it's here? What if it's around you now? What if all around you there is another dimension, another space, another time that is happening at the same time, simultaneously? It's just we don't have the sensors on our body. We don't have the senses to perceive it, to touch into those other dimensions. And maybe that's where you get people who do have some sort of ability to connect with other things. We just don't know, I guess. So I've run over a little bit with that Graham Hancock one. So I think I'm going to leave it there for this week, because I got a bit carried away with it. But it's something that I really really interests me, and if it does you too, then let me know. Let me know down in the comments below what you think. Do you think that these things exist? Do you think it's a ghost? Do you think it's aliens? Do you think it's fairies? Do you believe in these things as flesh and blood, real things that you can quantify and measure? Or do you think it's possible that it can be, when your consciousness is in a different state, it can perceive other things? Let me know what you think. So thank you very much for coming and listening and watching. Really appreciate it. Let me know what you think about privacy. Is it important? And let me know what you think about otherworldly entities in our consciousness. Every single week I knock this plant, so I'm going to have to move it, I think. But thank you very much. Please If you haven't hit the like button already, knock the like button for me. Subscribe and hit the bell notification so that you get notified every time I upload a new video. I do it every week, uploaded on either a Friday or a Saturday. And I just want to say, I really appreciate you coming in and taking your time to watch my videos, because I really enjoy doing them and discussing them. So thank you very much. And I hope you have a smashing week, and tell me all about it. Get in touch with me on social media. You can follow me on all the usuals, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Let me know and let's talk. Next time, grab yourself a drink. Come on down, watch me, get involved, and let's talk. Thanks very much. Thanks for watching. Cheers.